Ever since I was young, I was a huge fan of the X-Men. From starting with the comic books, to going to the films, to the cartoon shows, to the action figures, all of it. I couldn't get enough of the Merry Mutants. Ever since the Fox acquisition by Disney, fans like myself have been trying to figure out, where are the X-Men going to come from? What's going to happen to them? I've got some ideas. Brad Pencils presents the MCU X-Men. When dealing with the X-Men, you have to consider many factors. Who they are, where they came from. They need to feel like they live in our world. During Endgame, Rocket showed that the first snap by Thanos created this giant wave of radiation that affected the planet that has never been seen before. People theorize that this radiation caused the X gene to activate in all the people that have it on the planet. Where this seems feasible, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense in the long haul. Can you imagine Magneto driving a bus and all of a sudden his mutant powers activate? Or do you have baby Cyclops, his X gene activates, if you don't get to see Cyclops for another 20 years in the films? Does that seem right? The other theory that's out there is the idea that with the snap, it opened a whole bunch of portals to another dimensions, and that the X-Men come from a whole different place that we haven't been discovered or haven't seen before. Where this holds a little bit of merit just because we get the X-Men right away, it doesn't hold the same kind of weight. Along with the first theory, there's no history there. There's nothing that shows that there's been these mutants have lived in our world and have lived lives. It just shows that the whole mutant problem is going to happen eventually, or in this case with the other dimension, is that they're refugees, maybe even aliens considered to what the MCU world thinks about them. So it takes away that whole issue that mutants could be your neighbor. They could be the person who works beside you, and you wouldn't even know that they hold this gift inside of them. So I have to believe that these two theories are well-meaning, don't hold a lot of weight on how I believe the MCU puts one foot into reality and the other foot into the realm of sci-fi fantasy world. My biggest theory is that the mutants have lived in the Marvel Universe this whole time. You're probably thinking, how could this be? Where have they been? How come no one has noticed them? We didn't know about Wakanda until it was actually shown. We didn't know about the Skrulls until they debuted in Captain Marvel. We didn't even know that there was a Cap museum until we saw it in Winter Soldier. Maybe we haven't seen the mutants because they haven't revealed themselves yet. Take a look at the planet right now. There is at least 7.7 billion people living on this blue little marble. So, take 1% of that population. That is still 75 million people. That's a pretty big number for such a small percentage. So let's take a normal number. Let's put 1 million. 1 million people on this planet are mutants. Now, you can think that's a lot of people. But if you put them all in one city, of course you're going to see that's a lot of mutants. But spread across the planet, they become a lot less noticeable. If we take that number and we split it up in a couple different sections, it becomes a lot harder to locate mutants that could be living on this planet. Not all mutants have destructive powers like a Cyclops or something that's visible like Colossus. Some mutants have low-level powers like a Psychic. They don't show any kind of mutations. They just can read people's minds or can lift things with their mind. And then there's those mutants who can hide their powers easy, like an Iceman, who can just turn things cold, and you wouldn't be able to notice who they are. And there's some other mutants who have no choice. Their powers are physical. They just look different. And from the world opening up to us through the internet, we just believe we are desensitized by these people just because we believe that they have a medical condition. Nothing that we have to worry about, like a mutation. Another thing that could have been popping up is the fact that maybe mutation itself is a kind of a new phenomenon. Like, we know that there was the big baby boom in the 50s and 60s, but then there's also been another large boom in the past 20 to 30 years. So, I mean, it's not impossible to believe that the giant influx of mutations started to happen at the turn of the century. And now we're starting to see a lot more mutants with a lot crazier powers start to pop up. Now we get into the fun stuff on how the mutants fit into the larger Marvel universe. With what I've presented already, it may seem a little bit complicated on how they fit, but I think Marvel has actually solved that problem for us. The first step I think is going to be happening when we're dealing with the mutants is going to be in the film The Eternals. And if you don't know much about the Eternals, I'll just give a quick little description about what they are. Do you remember those Celestials in Guardians of the Galaxy? Those giant demigods, or what we consider the gods in the MCU? They actually came to Earth at almost near the beginning of time and started experimenting on apes, in which they created the Eternals, the Deviants, and human beings. Now let's say that some of those human beings had a little bit of testing on them and created a dormant gene, which would later become the Mutant X gene. And we can go through the rest of the time. We can even have appearances by Apocalypse with his mutant powers. You can even have Mr. Sinister pop up in around the 1800s, where he was experimenting on people in order to create the Mutant X gene. So it kind of shows that there's been mutants throughout time, but just not at the population that we all know from the comic books. Let's talk about the baby boomer generation for a second. This is around, like I said, the 1950s, 1960s, when that generation started to really come into prominence that we know today. I think there's actually a chance here Xavier and Magneto be born around this time, maybe around 1963, let's say. That would make them around their mid-50s, coming into their 60s, at about 2023 in the Marvel timeline. So you can have Magneto and Xavier grow up through whatever they go through. You can have Magneto go through any kind of atrocity that would shape him into the man that we all know he's going to become. The one thing that I think would be very beneficial is if they actually meet up sometime in the 80s. And when they met in the comic books, it was someplace in Israel when they were both doctors in a war-torn country. You can explain that in any place in the MCU. Hell, maybe it can even be in Sokovia. So I think sometime in the 80s is perfect so that they can meet and become friends. And at the same time, we can introduce Nick Fury into the story. Now, we know that he was a soldier in the 80s, and he later joins up sometime in the late 80s. So this could be the perfect little bridge to know where he stands, and that he actually has some sort of a connection with them. But we know that these three personalities will not get along for much longer. So I know there should be some sort of a rift between Xavier and Magneto. Let's just say something that happened in the animated series that we saw, where the two ideologies of these two men differ so much that it causes them to break off their friendship. We all know Ming Fury is the spy. So once he joined S.H.I.E.L.D., I'm sure he had this whole craziness with Magneto and Xavier in his back pocket, but didn't understand exactly what was going on. But you do know that he has some ideas for them. So we know in 1995, he's still as agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., but he's not liking what he's doing, like we've seen in Captain Marvel. And we do believe that Nick Fury becomes the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. sometime after that. And probably after that, we're going into the late 90s. Let's put it into 1998, and we can have two of the most important X-Men be born around this time, Cyclops and Jean Grey. So that would make them into their teens, early 20s come 2023. And that might be the perfect age to introduce these characters to a wide audience. During the time after Xavier and Magneto broke up, we can have Xavier take some time, almost a couple decades, to learn and study mutation and genetics and how he has to understand how his powers work, along with a whole bunch of other people. This is almost a lifetime for someone to learn. And of course, this is Xavier, one of the most powerful minds on the planet. He can figure this out, and he can understand ways in order to help people. So let's say he meets up with a young Cyclops in maybe 2013. Xavier finds this kid who can't control what he sees and what's coming out of his eyes, this powerful blast, and this is Xavier's first chance in order to help a young mutant, and that's where he understands what his purpose is to become a champion for this new wave of humanity coming into birth. And I would say around the 2014 mark is that we get the first instance of the X-Men. And it would be the original team. It would be Iceman, Archangel, Beast, Jean Grey. These 5 young mutants finally come together in order to live out this mission and this dream of helping others just like them. During that long period, we can also have Magneto starting to grow his powers and his malice and his hatred for humanity. Again, whatever he went through as a young man and as a child definitely have influence as to who he is now. Whether that is an atrocity that we've seen in our human history or something that is more directly connected to the Marvel Universe, that still remains to be seen. But that's something like that has to be in there for Magneto to work. He's starting to see the population of Earth start to get a little more fantastical with the arrival of the Avengers, aliens coming down, and seeing how the war machine of some of these nations are starting to come to pass, and that it's going to be, he believes that it's going to be more dangerous for someone like him to be able to walk the streets. He's already seeing that even though they don't know what mutants are, it's going to be a huge problem when they actually become outed. So I would say Magneto becomes he debuts sometime before the events of Sokovia of Age of Ultron, and he does something where the X-Men have no choice but to go and take him down. He can do the whole government facility and goes and activates a whole bunch of nukes like we saw in X-Men #1. So this would gain the attention of the US government. This would gain attention to probably S.H.I.E.L.D. in Nick Fury's little ragtag version, because at this time S.H.I.E.L.D's already gone kaput because of Hydra. But I think this could be something that the government has no choice but to intervene. Now, we can have that Xavier takes down Magneto, and in order to keep the mutant population still a secret, we can have Xavier kind of mind wipe everybody. Knowing that Xavier has this small little army of people with incredible abilities, this is not going to fly well with Nick Fury. And he is now has the Xavier on his radar for sure and having to keep his eyes open. And we can always have something where Magneto kind of gets taken by Xavier, and instead of getting put in some sort of secret facility or into the raft, he's taken someplace else that humans can't get a hold of him. And that's one thing that should be very, very important to portray, is that even with Xavier wanting the dream of humans and mutants coexisting together in peace, there still has to be that little bit of mistrust. So Xavier has formed the X-Men. He is now still kept the X-Men secret, and they're still doing the mission of trying to get as many mutants as they can to help and to guide in a path in order to control their powers so that they can keep the mutant population a secret from humans until they're ready to out themselves to a wider audience. So probably at this point, let's say this is 2017, there's a new mutant that emerges, and Xavier sends the X-Men out to go and find them. They go out on their mission, and all of a sudden, they go dark. Xavier can't hear them, they can't sense them. The X-Men have essentially disappeared. And that's where I'm going to leave it. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been the very first episode in a series of videos I'm going to be doing about the MCU X-Men. Please hit that like button if you like what I was talking about. Make sure to comment and let me know if I'm full of crap or if I'm right on the money with what's going on with the X-Men. And be sure to subscribe to my channel with a new episode coming next time. And also, I have a new video every Wednesday and Friday. So thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.